My name is Brandon, and 8 years ago, I thought I was the luckiest guy alive. I had just married the love of my life, Jessica, and we were expecting twins. Life was perfect, or so I thought. When Mia and Lucas were born, I remember looking at these tiny, perfect little humans and feeling this overwhelming rush of love. I didn't care that they looked more like Jessica's side of the family. I didn't care that Lucas had green eyes when both Jessica and I have brown. Love doesn't need DNA, right? These were my babies, and I was going to be the best dad in the world. For 8 years, I lived that promise. I was the dad who never missed a soccer game, never missed a school play, never missed tucking them in at night. When Lucas had nightmares, I was the one who sat by his bed until he fell back asleep. When Mia scraped her knee learning to ride a bike, I was the one who kissed it better and taught her to get back up. Jessica and I, well, we had our problems. She was distant, always seemed like she had something on her mind. I chalked it up to the stress of raising twins, of building our careers, of just life being life. I thought every marriage went through rough patches. Everything came crashing down on a Tuesday morning in March. Jessica had been acting weird for weeks, more secretive than usual, taking phone calls in other rooms, staying up late on her laptop. When I asked her about it, she'd just say it was work stuff or family drama. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? That morning, she left early for what she said was a breakfast meeting, but she forgot her phone on the kitchen counter. When it started buzzing nonstop, I figured it might be an emergency from her office, so I glanced at the screen. The message preview made my blood run cold. The lawyer says we need to tell Brandon about the twins before the divorce papers are filed. He deserves to know they're not his. I stared at that phone for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 30 seconds. The words didn't make sense. My brain couldn't process what I was reading. Not his? What did that mean, not his? I did something I'd never done in 8 years of marriage. I unlocked her phone. What I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. There were months of text messages between Jessica and her lawyer. Messages about hiding assets, about custody arrangements, about how to break the news gently that Mia and Lucas weren't biologically mine. There were older messages, going back years, to someone named Craig. Messages that made it clear that he was the twins' biological father and that Jessica had known this from day one. But here's the part that really broke me. Craig didn't want anything to do with the kids. He'd been pressuring Jessica for years to tell me the truth so he could stop feeling guilty about it. He wanted a clean conscience, not a relationship with his children. I sat in my kitchen, holding my wife's phone, reading about how the two people I'd given everything to for 8 years weren't even mine, and how the woman I'd loved was planning to take them away from me anyway. The kids were getting ready for school upstairs. I could hear Mia arguing with Lucas about borrowing her colored pencils, could hear their little feet running around above my head. In 20 minutes, I'd be driving them to school like I did every morning. I'd kiss them goodbye and tell them to have a good day, just like always. Except now I knew that legally, they weren't mine, and Jessica was about to make sure I'd never see them again. When Jessica came home that afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table with printed copies of all the messages laid out in front of me. "We need to talk," I said, and she knew immediately that her secret was out. What followed was the most painful conversation of my life. She broke down, admitted everything. She'd had an affair with Craig right before we got married. When she found out she was pregnant, she genuinely didn't know who the father was, but she hoped it was me. When the twins were born and started looking more like Craig, she suspected the truth but was too scared to find out for sure.
She'd finally gotten a paternity test done 6 months ago. The results confirmed what she'd feared. Both twins were Craig's. "Why now?" I asked her. "Why tell the lawyer before telling me?" Her answer gutted me. Because Craig wants to get married, and his fiancée doesn't want the complication of kids from a previous relationship hanging over them. He convinced me it would be easier on everyone if you just moved on. Easier on everyone, except for Mia and Lucas, who would lose the only father they'd ever known. Except for me, who would lose the two people who meant more to me than my own life. That's when I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I want custody, I told her. Jessica stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Brandon, they're not yours. You have no legal right. I've been their father for 8 years, I cut her off. I've loved them, raised them, been there for every scraped knee and every bedtime story. Biology doesn't erase that. I'm going to fight for them. What followed was the ugliest legal battle of my life. Jessica's lawyer argued that I had no claim to children who weren't biologically mine. Craig, true to form, wanted nothing to do with the court proceedings but also didn't want to pay child support, so he was pushing for me to just step aside gracefully. But here's the thing about being a dad for 8 years. You learn to fight for what matters. And nothing mattered more than Mia and Lucas. My lawyer was a badass woman named Carmen Rodriguez who specialized in cases like mine. She explained that while biology typically determines legal parentage, there are exceptions for cases where someone has acted as a parent figure for an extended period. It's called psychological parentage, and it was my only shot. The hardest part was explaining to the twins what was happening. How do you tell an 8-year-old that mommy and daddy are getting divorced and that there's a chance daddy might not be able to see them anymore without completely destroying their sense of security? I sat them down one evening after dinner. You know how mommy and I haven't been getting along lately? I started. Mia, always the perceptive one, nodded seriously. Are you getting divorced like Emma's parents? We are. But I need you both to know something really important. No matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you, I will always be your dad. I will always love you more than anything in the world. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we stay together. Lucas, younger and more emotional, started crying. Why can't you and mommy just stop fighting? I pulled them both into my lap. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, buddy. Big mistakes that can't be fixed. But you and Mia, you're not mistakes. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The custody battle took 6 months. 6 months of court dates, psychological evaluations, and character witnesses. My friends, family, and even some of Jessica's relatives testified about my relationship with the twins. Their teachers talked about how I was the parent who always showed up, always volunteered, always made sure they felt loved and supported. Jessica's side tried to paint me as delusional, as a man who couldn't accept reality. They argued that it would be healthier for the children to have a clean break and start fresh with their real family. But the twins themselves were my strongest advocates. During their private interviews with the family court counselor, both Mia and Lucas were adamant. I was their dad, and they wanted to live with me. The judge's decision came on a Friday afternoon in October. I'll never forget sitting in that courtroom, holding my breath as she read her ruling. While Mr. Brandon Taylor is not the biological father of the minor children, the court finds that he has acted as their psychological parent for their entire lives. The children have bonded with Mr. Taylor as their father figure, and it would be detrimental to their emotional well-being to sever that relationship. Therefore, the court awards primary custody to Mr. Taylor with supervised visitation rights for the biological mother. I broke down crying right there in the courtroom, not just from relief, but from the overwhelming realization that I'd actually won. Mia and Lucas were staying with me. Jessica was granted visitation every other weekend and one evening per week. Craig, after the dust settled, decided he didn't want any involvement at all. He signed away his parental rights and disappeared from our lives completely. That was 3 years ago. Today, Mia is 11 and Lucas is 11, and they're thriving. Mia is on the honor roll and plays violin in the school orchestra. Lucas is the star of his league team and wants to be a veterinarian when he grows up. Jessica, well, she moved to another state with her new husband. She still sees the kids for her scheduled visitation, but our relationship is purely co-parental now. I don't hate her anymore.
I can't afford to carry that anger when I have two amazing kids to raise. The funny thing is, becoming a single dad was the best thing that ever happened to me. Without the stress and tension of a failing marriage, I could focus completely on being the father Mia and Lucas deserved. We developed routines, inside jokes, traditions that were just ours. Every night before bed, we do what we call gratitude time. Each of us shares 3 things we're grateful for from that day. Without fail, both kids always include dad in their list. And without fail, I always include being your dad in mine. People sometimes ask me if I ever regret fighting for custody of children who aren't biologically mine. The question doesn't even make sense to me. Biology is just science. Love is what makes a family. I may not have given Mia and Lucas their DNA, but I gave them their first words, their first steps, their sense of security, their belief that they're worthy of unconditional love. I taught them to ride bikes, to throw a baseball, to stand up for themselves and others. They call me dad because that's who I am. Not because of genetics, but because of 8 years of midnight fevers, homework help, soccer practices, and bedtime stories. Because of 3 years of fighting for them when everyone said I should walk away. Last month, Lucas asked me if he could take my last name permanently. He said, "I want people to know I'm really yours, Dad." "Buddy," I told him, "you've been really mine since the day you were born. A piece of paper isn't going to make that more true, but we're doing the paperwork anyway. Because sometimes making things official is important too." The truth is, I did get lucky 8 years ago. Not because I married Jessica, but because I became Mia and Lucas's dad. Everything else was just details.